Welcome to the colloquia of the Iparcos, Istituto di Fisica delle Particolae del Cosmos. It's a pleasure today to introduce Professor Frank Krauss. He's professor in Durham, and he's now director of... Welcome to the colloquia of the Iparcos, Istituto di Fisica delle Particolae del Cosmos. Welcome to the colloquia of the Iparcos. Professor Krauss is now director of the Institute of Data Science in Durham, and Krauss is now director of the Institute of Data Science in Durham, and this stuff is rebooting. And he will now tell us about a master course that they are organizing in the University of Durham, which is very inspiring for all the Iparcos community, and concerns the scientific data analysis. Professor Krauss has worked at CERN, and he's an expert in quantum chromosome. And the institute which he directs has also very many similarities with the one they're working in. So, welcome, Frank, and please start whenever you like.
Okay. Thank you very much for the very kind invitation. It's a great pleasure to virtually be there and to talk about my experiences with creating a master's course. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and let me do that. I hope you can see my screen now. If you can't, please interrupt me. Okay. So, as the title suggests, I'm going to talk about how to create a master's course in scientific computing and data analysis. And to give you some background, just let me try to explain to you how we started doing that. The source of this master's course was the success in some funding scheme. So in 2016, STFC, which is the UK funding agency for particle physics and astronomy, announced plans to award a number of doctoral training centers. So at the moment, our funding for PhD students is pretty much defined by the number of academics that you have in your group. And every academic in STFC space has, on average, one PhD students every 4 years if you're a theorist, and every 2 to 3 years if you're an experimental or observational astronomer. So in 2016, as I've said, they announced plans to award a number of doctoral training centers, or CDTs, and there was some appreciation apprehension, in fact, that this could be a change in how STFC funds future PhD students. The focus of their plans was very much on data analysis or data science for large-scale data. So it was pretty much geared towards our experimental and observational colleagues. For particle physics, clearly Large Hadron Collider physics was one of the big hitters. For astronomy, it was the large astronomical surveys. So it was really about how to deal with large amounts of data in a good way, and how to do the data science of that. Now, in Durham, we are mainly, when it comes to particle physics, we are pretty much exclusively theorists. And in astronomy, we have, I would say, about a 50-50 split between observational astronomy and theory. So it was pretty clear that these CDTs were not necessarily geared towards us. Nevertheless, we decided to put an application. So we had a bit. It was mainly driven by theory phenomenology. We talked a lot about how it's not only real-world data but also synthetic data that need to be analyzed, and how this is a perfect training ground. But to be honest, we thought we had absolutely no chance to even getting it. We just wanted to understand how this new scheme would work out. We want to understand the rules. Basically, want to get some feedback on how it works. So we thought we had no chance. The bizarre thing is, we won one of the 5 or 6 of these centers, and in the first year, STFC awarded us 11 PhD studentships under the condition that the Durham University supports 4 further PhD studentships, and in the second year it was a 4+2. So in STFC space, a typical thing that happens is, and that is true for pretty much all across UK science funding, the funders quite often ask for financial engagement of the universities. In that specific case, we had to pretty much pay for a third of our PhD students out of our own pocket. As part of the bid, one of the things that STFC wanted to see from us was how we provide structured training in data science and computing. For structured training means pretty much a structured lecture course for the full cohort of 15 PhD students in the first year and 6 PhD students in the second year. Now, although we were lucky, we were unlucky because we got notice of the award in April, actually after the deadline of when typically PhD students are hired in the UK, and it was all for start in October 2017. So we had about 4 months' time to produce our structured training course. We had kind of structured it in the bid, but we never thought it would be any kind of reality. So we were a little bit surprised that we actually had to now do it. And so just to give you an idea about how this structured training, how we thought about it, let me give you a little bit of a background of what we built on. So typically, lectures in Durham for undergraduate students happen in 2 out of 3 terms. So we have not semesters, but we have trimesters. We have a winter term, we have an early spring term, and we have an early summer term. For undergrads, our early summer term is typically the time when we do revision lectures and when they sit their exams. So for us, it was pretty clear the structured teaching has to happen in the 2 first terms, so 10 weeks each. The winter term, October to December, and the early spring term, January to March. It was very clear that we wanted to have a course for all the students, both in particle physics and astrophysics cosmology, where we develop critical skills in data analysis and scientific computing. But we had to do this in parallel with the domain knowledge, because at the end of the day, the students would have to write their PhD thesis in particle physics and cosmology. We knew that the domain knowledge wouldn't necessarily be a problem, because we have existing PhD lecture programs. In particle physics, we actually do have, I think, a super duper intense Master of Science postgraduate course with about 250 lectures. So we extracted of the order of 90 to 100 lectures, which is about the amount of not so structured PhD lectures that our astrophysics colleagues give. Our teaching in the MSc course, so in the particle physics course, happens in 4-week intervals. So typically the students have 4 different lecture courses every 4 weeks. So in total, it's 16 lecture courses with a little bit of choice in it. And it's typically 16 lecture hours, so 4 hours per week. So we identified of the order of 6 of these lecture courses that the students would have to take as domain knowledge. And obviously, if you do that, and if you kind of modularize your teaching, you have to ask yourself how you do it best. And for us, the simple solution was, we said, okay, everything that is domain knowledge will be taught in the morning, and everything that is broader skills is taught in the afternoon. So it was pretty intense for the students as well. I don't want to bore you so much with what kind of lectures we give in particle physics. feel free to ask afterwards, but I think it's a little bit out of scope. I think it's quite interesting to talk, however, about the skills part of the training program, and in particular the lectures. So we had a couple of introductory courses already from other sections in our department, or we created some new ones. So we had we produced 4 introductory courses of 16 hours each, 16 contact hours, 1 in statistics and data analysis, 1 in introductory machine learning, 1 in scientific programming and computational physics, and 1 in programming with compiled languages. And the first 3, statistics, machine learning, and the basic concepts of scientific programming, were all done in Python. The students had to program their data analysis. They had to program whatever they did in machine learning by using the typical Python packages. They had to write their own little numerical codes, and they had to do all this in Python. This choice was pretty much based on our experience in undergrad, where Python is at the moment, I think, the most taught language in physics departments in the UK. And for the programming with compiled languages, we offered Fortran and C. So they were all delivered in the first term in 2 4-week intervals. In the first 4-week interval, we had statistics and the scientific programming. And the second 4-week interval, we had the machine learning and the programming with compiled languages, because they build on each other. We also added a mini MBA, pretty much 1 quite intensive week, somewhere in second term, which was pretty much concerned with entrepreneurial skills, project management, etc. It was delivered by someone from our business school, and as a little project, we roped in a local partner. So Durham County has a disaster manager, which is the kind of overall boss of fire services, ambulances, and hospitals, and some technical stuff. And we played with the potential disaster and what kind of software-driven tools our students would produce for immediate disaster relief. Very nice. They did some stuff, and I think this disaster manager was pretty much impressed. So that was our structured lecture program. But we also had another part which was projects, because when you hire 15 PhD students, you have to be sure that if they're not quite there to be a PhD, they at least leave the university with a degree. So we produced a final project as a team project where the students would exercise their skills mostly somehow outside the university. So we built, out of our 15 students, we built for the first cohort, we built 5 teams of 3 students. 3 of them went to CERN, helped Inspire with some search algorithm. 3 people went to IBEX, a small enterprise in medical imaging. And I come back to that in a second, because I think that's quite nice. 3 of our young people went to Nissan, and we had 2 projects, 3 people each, 1 in particle physics and 1 in cosmology. At the end, the students reported what they did in a one-day workshop with industry partners, and we actually had 2 of these workshops before lockdowns and pandemics completely derailed us. Our students on top of that our PhD students on top of that, over their 4 years, have to spend at least 6 months in a non-academic placement, and they were quite. It was quite a wide range. Now, let me go back to this IBEX thing, because that was quite a winner. So our 3 students helped IBEX to clean X-ray images. So IBEX has the founding idea of IBEX is to use some kind of grid to produce extra information through interference patterns by having a little bit of a grid structure before the X-rays hit the body. But in order to take full advantage of that, you first have to you basically have to clean the X-ray images to make sure that fractures are visible. So you have to define clear borders between bone and soft tissue. Ibex had a couple of corpses, pretty much all imported from the US actually, X-rayed them on a daily basis, and our students played with imaging technology. In the end, they trained the technicians of Ibex in using Python and in using the machine learning tools of Python. They produced software that became critical for Ibex to put their product onto the market. They went to the world's largest medical imaging conference and won the prize for best student poster. So I would say that they pretty much nailed it. And in a similar way, our 3 students who were at Nissan optimized how the final varnish of cars is applied. Apparently, the biggest reason for Nissan to get cars back directly from the vendors is that there's little micro fissures in the varnish. And our students found a way of how to use normal light instead of X-ray light to look for these micro fissures within less than a minute, because that's about the speed with which cars in this Nissan factory get the colors applied. So basically, they optimized how the varnish is sprayed over the cars. Now, for the non-academic placements, we had a couple of people working with the Airbus Development Center for smart planes. We had people working for Startup Bank, Atom Bank, to optimize a way of how to provide security by looking for anomalies. We had a student working for an energy provider here at a local nuclear power plant to do predictive maintenance. Some of our students went back to Ibex. We had a student who worked for data science consultancy and convinced them that to use Python instead of R. They went back to Nissan, of course. We have a local provider of electricity and water, Northumbrian Water. Our students optimized the distribution of electric charging stations for their cars. And we had one student who worked for 6 months at the United Nations in the data science part of the United Nations. And in fact, he now works there as a researcher. So he turned his placement into permanent post after his PhD. So I think all in all, the one thing I would say is our students went to a variety of very, very different places, very different sectors, high-tech industry, consultancy, banks, public sector like United Nations. And I think by far and large, every single project they did was a big success. Our industry partners want to have many, many more students. So having such a cohort of PhD students, I think, is a really big success. And in fact, STFC continued with the CDTs. We had a second round of CDTs, but unfortunately, some of our competitors copied a lot of what we did actually. So we were not successful. So that was the starting point. And I should basically the very moment we had our students going through the motions in 2017, I tried to convince the university to turn our PhD to turn our really, really good PhD training into a full standalone Master of Science course. I don't know how it is in Madrid, but in Durham, this means you have to fill in an amazing number of forms. So I filled in, I think, 4 or 5 different sets of forms for content, what kind of students we would like to recruit, etc., etc., etc. And after all this, the university decided that they didn't want to increase the student number that are directly attached to physics. And they basically told me, no chance, we're not going to do this MSc. So I started pushing a little bit, and after some time, they they decided that, in fact, it would be really nice to have an MSc in data science, but only if we partner with the mathematical science and computer science, and if the students are formally attached to one of the two departments. So they told me in late summer 2018 that now is the time to produce something, and we would have to start recruiting in March 2019 for the first intake of students in October 2019. So that was a toughie. I was pretty disappointed that they didn't like the idea, but then I was quite happy that they did like it together with maths and computer science. We teamed our resources, we put our resources and experiences, and we came up with a course structure that is extremely similar what we did for the PhDs, with a little bit of a twist to make sure that both maths and computer science are happy with it. So we built our MSc course on what I would call the relatively good experience we had so far. We put the lecture courses into the 2 terms. We kept the structure modular to adapt the timetabling. So we had some rules about when to deliver the skills and when to deliver the domain knowledge lectures. We continue teaching, especially the skills, in bursts of 4 weeks. We found that this is something that allows our students to fully engage with the topic. The skills are taught in a very hands-on way, so I would say it's more like a practical example class than really lecture. And the typical unit size would still be 16 contact hours over 4 weeks. Lots of homework, so quite interesting. Our course in total gives 180 credits. We split it threefold, pretty much equal thirds: 1/3 skills, 1/3 domain knowledge, and 1/3 the project. And then we had to make sure that, and that was a political thing. We had to make sure that every department owns some skills modules and that everyone is happy, because ultimately, for the internal finances, you pretty much distribute the tuition fees per student according to the credits they are taught in a single department. In order to get maths and computer science fully on board, we offered a skill specialization in the second term. So something that we didn't have for the PhD training is something that we added now. And our students, after the first term lectures that pretty much remained the same and are delivered by physics, now make a decision for the second term, January to March, when they want to specialize rather in data analysis, delivered by maths, or in scientific computing, delivered by computer science. So that is pretty much the course structure that we had in 2019. We had what I would call professional skills, which in total was worth something along the lines of 15 credits. It's very short, and we do it pretty much as some introductory lectures. Introduction to Python, a little bit about software carpentry, about project management, about scientific writing, which for a lot of our students is quite important. We do a little bit about data presentation, visualization, how to use versioning systems. So basically, it's really about how to be a software professional. In our course and in our core skills, we have core 1, and that is pretty much what we inherited from the PhD lectures. So it's introduction to data analysis, scientific computing, high performance computing, machine learning. And then, as I've said, there comes the split. It's either advanced statistics and machine learning, or it's advanced scientific and high performance computing. And for subject specializations, we had astronomy and particle physics. And for particle physics, we did this pretty much by extraction from our existing master's course, where the students had to go through the lectures that you see in this orange here. In the third term, our students write a project thesis. Now this is now done alone because that is how we have to do this with MSc students. The duration is typically of the order of 3 months. It ends in a written thesis of about 30 pages, and they have different options, either with the public or private sector partner. For this case, when we do public or private sector partners, we have very few of them. We typically form teams with very kind of individual tasks, or within their subject specialization, so either astronomy or particle physics, or they do some methodological work, because not all of our intake were really interested in astronomy or particle physics. So now this sounds all really nice, but you also have, if you ever think about having a master's course, you have to convince yourself that you can actually make it real, that it works out, and there are different considerations that in the UK are quite important. So the first of all it's really the financial considerations, and you have to ask yourself, how much more lectures do you have to give, including marking of exams, including example class supervision, including supervision of final projects. And it was typically additionally something like 64, 70, 80 lecture hours to each department of additional lectures, plus the supervision of final projects. And we estimated that this means that each department has to put about 2/3 of a teaching position into it, including all our overheads, which are quite drastic. We estimated that the cost of this per department is about £100,000, maybe a little bit less, but we want to be on the safe side. So we have additional staff costs of about £300,000, and that needs to be recovered by the fees we take. Now, pretty much the fee profile that we came up with is that the UK students pay an annual fee of £10,000 tuition fee, and international students typically pay £20,000 tuition fees. So we projected that we would have 8 national plus 12 international students. We came up with this number by doing a careful, actually quite in-depth analysis of the market. So we looked at courses of other institutions. We checked what kind of data science courses, mainly data science courses, are provided by other departments in the UK. And the first thing that we found is that pretty much no UK institution had a data science course that was provided by our combination of subjects. So quite often the data science courses are provided by business schools. They're typically, we looked at the syllabus, they're typically quite, let me call them science light. They are much into machine learning a la Amazon, throw a neural network at your data and try to have 1% more turnover or so. But there was not a single course really that at postgraduate level looked at data science for exact natural sciences. And so we thought we had a unique selling point. We made a pretty strong case for it. We surveyed our final year students in 3 departments in how far they would be interested in taking such a course. And we were very confident that we would get 20 students a year. Now, that was all what happened between October and March, April. The university was still in the process of allowing the course. That's too bad. My beautiful poster is gone. Anyway, so we started our recruitment in April. Finally, our advertisement with the posters, word of mouth. We announced it on practically every conference that we were. Our marketing guys have an annual travel to China and to India, so really a big advertisement drive, university webpage, etc. We targeted primarily students with a first degree in STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, maths. Our main international intake was indeed from China. So we had 32 international students, with 30 of them coming from China, and we had 8 national students. We completely, we were way more successful than we ever dreamt of. And so the university started making money out of this immediately, which was really nice, because that meant they liked us. Now, the course is running since 2019. We, in the meantime, phased out the particle physics specialization because there's only 1 or 2 students per year. And to be quite honest, if you offer a course like that to people with a background, say, in engineering, and you have a student with a first degree in engineering trying to do particle theory, that is really a recipe for disaster. So we phased that out. We now toy with the idea to phase it back in and specifically advertise it. But in 2020, we added financial math, fintech, a specialization that is mainly driven by math. We added a specific data acquisition module that is driven by us in physics. Last year, we added an Earth observation module. So basically, analysis of structures with drone and satellite imagery, which is particularly interesting for our friends in Earth science and geography. And in this year, we added a module in robotics, which is where computer science and engineering started to play. We changed our modules a little bit. In the beginning, we had relatively large modules, were 30 credits each, which was not very good. It increased the chance of non-compensatable failures quite a lot. So we kept our lecture profile, but we reject the modules just to make sure that our students don't fail in large numbers. Despite COVID, we consolidate our student numbers, so we have about 50 students intake per year, maybe a little bit more. Unfortunately, we are not very diverse, so we have lots of Chinese students. They seem to love the course. The one thing that I would say is that I personally think is a little bit of a fail is we thought we would have more industry-led projects, but it turns out that the time scales of reaction times of industry and reaction times of university and students is not necessarily extremely well aligned. So we have to work on that a little bit. That already brings me to the summary. I try to keep my talk relatively short because I'm fairly certain there's a lot of questions that you may want to ask if you want to do something like that. The one thing I would say is if you ever, either individually or collectively, think about creating a new course, it's not necessarily trivial. There are certainly institutional boundary conditions. In the UK, one of the big things I think that I would call an institutional boundary condition is there's a divergence of drivers. Typical UK universities are very much aware of income. So if you add a new teaching activity, and in particular a completely new course, that then you need to convince the university that you generate enough income. At the same time, the academics, we don't do it for the fun of it. We want to get something out of it. And so it's important to also produce a course that is actually good to teach, where you have an idea that maybe some of your MSc students become your PhD students, that you can use it for PhD training. You want to get something out of it. Anything else would be really silly. The other thing I would say is the very moment you start doing data science, you will find out that lots of people believe they do data science, and some of them actually do. So you have to be kind of nifty how you present your case politically, how to take how to get other departments and other groupings at the university on board. In order for such a course to succeed, finally, you need to understand the market. It makes no sense to produce a fantastic new course and you have 2 students sitting there. It's a complete waste of time. So you want to make sure that you have appreciable student numbers. And the one thing we found with our students is, for them, a main driver to do a postgrad course in data science really is employability. They see this as a really good pathway to increase their chances of meaningful, highly paid employment. I think you need a unique selling point. Um, it makes, in my mind, absolutely no sense to offer such a course as an online course. Um, Whatever you think, how cheap you can do it, MIT does it as cheap and probably better. So you have to do it in person, and you have to ask yourself very carefully, um, whom do you think you can recruit? What is the kind of thing that sets you apart from everybody else? Why do you think it's interesting for people? So basically, you have to understand the drivers, and you have to understand what kind of funnel you have for potential students to actually take your course. And I think, especially for data science, which is very cross-cutting, um, it is quite important to keep a course modular and make it attractive for other departments to buy in. Um, there's lots of synergies to be had. It makes no sense across university to have one one data science course per department. It makes much more sense to have a data science skills part, and then allow
El sonido y todo.
Ignacio.
Voy a quitar el audio.
Ignacio.
Can you hear me now?
No.
I can hear you. That's funny. Wait. Hmm.
Can you hear me? Can I go on? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know you are listening to me, the rest of the world. Can I go on? Yeah. Okay, seems that now I can formulate my questions. And I have a first question, Frank, about the stage of the student. And how do you make this stage compatible with a PhD? I mean, I think PhD students have a kind of contract. So do you interrupt their contract? Do you make a half-day contract with the enterprises? How does it work in practice?
There are by far and large three different models. With the placement, the simplest model is we just send the students and continue paying for them, and we do that in particular with smaller companies. With larger companies, we ask them to either pay us as some kind as academics through consultancy, or we ask our students to pause their PhD for 3 or 6 months, during which their stipend is not being paid, but the company, but we re-employ them as consultants for the company. So we basically, our PhD students are not allowed to work more than 6 hours per week as consultants or for any private or public sector partner. But we can, if they interrupt their studies, we can hire them back on a per hour or per week or per month way as consultants and pay them. We actually pay them then a little bit more money than they would get as compared to their PhD stipend. So it's quite nice.
That's easy to imagine. Yeah, I think it's definitely easy to imagine. And it's not clear to me what are the benefits for your institution. I mean, I can understand the benefit for university, but on the other side, you are a kind of institution that probably you would like to have some benefit on your own, not just shared with all the rest of university. What kind of agreement have you reached in order to have something for you?
So I think there's 2 answers to that. The one answer is that as a department, we increased our teaching income, which is quite important for us because if we want to grow in size, we need to generate more income, and that is one way of generating more income. You basically have a valuable activity. The university earns money with it, and this extra money can be converted at some point in extra positions. It actually helped us in hiring a teaching specialist as assistant professor. So we have a departmental bonus from this that we look better and we generate more internal money in some spreadsheet. The other benefit is that the better of these students do projects with us, and because they're typically technically pretty good, we can use them to explore new avenues. So one of my colleagues used a series of these students to reinvent himself as someone who uses machine learning for higher order correction. So you basically can use the students during their projects really as some kind of risk-free crash test dummies, nearly, I would say, to check out science ideas. Because for master's thesis, it's low risk. If they do anything, it's a good thesis. But if you see that this anything actually is good, you may want to use this. So I typically use, when I have my final year of master's students, I typically use them to explore things and explore silly ideas I have.
So this actually answer to my following question, which are what are the academic benefit of this kind of students? And you definitely can find some academic benefit apart from the other benefit for the
Absolutely.
institution.
Absolutely. The other thing I would say is, especially when you partner with other departments, you will find out very quickly that as a physicist, you may not be really good in understanding, say, satellite imagery, but we are very good in asking the right questions. Because we're as researchers, we're relatively numerate. So I had a couple of interdisciplinary joint projects where I learned a lot of other stuff, just pretty much for the fun of it. But I think it made me a better scientist. So in terms of personal development, doing some interdisciplinary work, for some of us, I think it's a good way of making sure that we don't grow old and boring.
Absolutely. And you commented about the collaboration of enterprises, which is an essential part of this course that you're giving. So just a curiosity, so how easy was to start with, or how difficult it was to convince enterprises to enter in a project like this?
They loved it.
They loved it since the beginning.
They loved it from the beginning. We started with our PhD students, and when you tell them that they can have PhD students for 3 or 6 months to test an idea or to develop something, they know that they typically get people with intellectual ability way above the average employee. So it's they pay a significant amount of money. So for this nuclear power plant, just as an example, the student who went to the nuclear power plant was my PhD student. So I try to make sure that they pay, because it's a really rich company. So no problem for me morally to ask for a lot of money. They paid nearly £50,000 for 6 months of work.
Wow.
And they asked for more. But I don't have any, at the moment, I don't have any PhD student who would want to go. So we were completely oversubscribed. It was ridiculous. Our students had free picks.
Yeah. Okay. And one thing about the implementation, say in your courses, you start with Python. And because you say Python is commonly taught in a UK university. So, however, I don't know how much Python is used in enterprises and so on. Probably they use other languages. It's not really. So, is Python perhaps too academic, or is one doesn't care?
No, I think Python actually is a pretty good language that is, in fact, relatively widely being used because it's relatively versatile. It is an extremely good language if you want to do machine learning, because it has pretty much all the functionality of R by now. It is not a good language for scientific computing when you have to crunch lots of numbers, because it's not a compiled language. So, if you want to do an event generator for the LHC, doing it in Python is a really stupid idea. So for the actual number crunching, you need C or Fortran or so. But to bind stuff together, I think if I would create a code structure now, I would use Python as at the top layer. It's a very, very powerful language.
Another thing for a student, so what about the informatic equipment that the university provides to your students? Say, do you need fully equipped informatic rooms, or just every student comes with its own laptop and just work with its own laptop?
We pretty much assume that every student has a laptop. But we had to buy a couple of GPUs. But honestly, cheap. It's you get relatively good GPUs for students, completely sufficient at the level of a few 10,000 euros or pounds, you are completely, for 50 students, you're probably overpowered nearly.
I see. Yeah, no, definitely. And concerning the conflict between teaching in normal courses and teaching in modules like this, I mean, I think that not all your department takes part to these modulus. I mean, just a part of this. And these things usually generate some friction for people which is in, which is out, and so on. So, can you tell us about some gossip, perhaps, or something?
Yeah.
How do you convince the people which don't want to be part of it, but on the other side don't want even to start it? Or do you have some such cases?
Okay. So when you look at our teaching profile, let me say, we have in undergrad, we have courses with 250, 300 students, which obviously they're stressful to teach.
Mm-hmm.
In the final year, we typically have courses of 40, 50 students, which are easy to teach by comparison. Our postgrad course in particle physics has only 25 people. And that's a complete walk in the park. The MSc course that we have in data science sits somewhere in the middle because you have 50 students roundabout, but you have a lot of Chinese students in it. So language is a problem, and that makes teaching actually quite hard. We compensate for these differences by putting different multipliers to different lectures. So everyone is supposed to teach something like 700 hours, whatever, 600, 700 hours of teaching related activities. And so if you do a big undergrad lecture for the first time, every lecture counts like 10 hours because you have to prepare it. Every postgrad lecture counts only as 6 hours.
I see.
So there is, we try to compensate for that. I wouldn't say we are perfect, but it's pretty clear. You have to find an idea of how you capture that different activities are differently stressful.
I see. And you mentioned the Chinese students that you have, which are a big part of your public, say, or your attendees. So are these Chinese people coming just for this course, or they are the people that have already started in the Durham University and wants to continue there?
No, it's typically, they typically come from China. So Durham has per year of around about 3,000 Chinese students. And they are a significant part of our income. And we have about 30 who come directly from China, which during lockdown obviously was a problem, which still is a problem because if they travel back now, they still have to be in isolation for 2 weeks. So our postgrad students stayed in Durham, and it's a little bit of a tragedy. They can't travel home to their families for a year, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I should say that I have the suspicion that for what you would call the Chinese middle classes, sending their one child to a university in Europe or the US is a big status factor. So I think for our Chinese students, they have to pay a lot of money, but it's social status. I also have the suspicion that it's a wedding market.
Mm-hmm. Understand. And I think I have no more question for today. I don't know if the public wants to add more question. I don't see anything in the chat. Consider that this video will be available at our university for some time. So I think that many people which are not present now will have the occasion to look at it in the next days. I know several colleagues which had classes today could not join us. And okay, if there are no more questions, probably I close here. I want to thank again Frank, and I want to say sorry about my poor presentation at the beginning, which is part of my inexperience with the mean I had to use for my first time. And of course, he's very welcome to come here to Madrid to give some in-person talk or whatever. And with physics, also about physics, not only about his duties as a director of an institute.
Super, thank you.
And okay, so thanks a lot to everybody, and we close here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.